After talking to Miami's offensive coordinator today, it's becoming more and more clear. Elijah Lofton is going to be the Hurricanes' top weapon.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday Eve. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. On this loaded episode, we do have today a Jackson Cantwell update. Top recruit in the class of 2026. Miami is among his official 6 finalists. According to On3 Sports, Hurricanes could be top 3. And Jackson Cantwell said something very interesting about the stretch run of his recruiting process. We'll get to that and what it means for Miami. Was Carson Beck snubbed off of the top 10 returning quarterbacks list of a prominent college football media member? But let's talk first offense. We'll talk some defense on this episode as well. Both coordinators spoke after practice today. Shannon Dawson, the offensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, the defensive coordinator. Today was Thursday, the final spring practice before the spring game. There are a lot of former players out there today. I got to look at Bernie Kosar, who was out at practice today. Bernie was looking good. I know he had some recent health issues, but he's bounced back in a strong way, which is awesome to see. There were a lot of player parents out there, a lot of smiles on the faces of the players after practice. It sort of had like a last day of school kind of feeling today, although the final exam from that semester is coming up on Saturday when the Hurricanes take the field at Cobb Stadium for the spring game. And, a player on the offensive side of the football that has every Miami fan excited about the possibilities and how we expect this guy to take his game to the next level with a lot more reps this year is Elijah Lofton, who's just heading into his second year. Should be the number one tight end in this offense and perhaps the number one weapon overall in this offense as well. And, in speaking with Shannon Dawson today, Miami's OC, one of the first things that stood out to me when I asked Dawson about the tight end room, which has got, a mix of more experienced guys like Alex Bowman, the Tulane transfer, and, Jack Nickel transfers in with some experience down to, the true freshmen like Brock Schott and Luka Gilbert, and, of course, Elijah Lofton heading into his second year. One thing that he mentioned was that even though Lofton has not been in college for very long, he really, at this point, is an experienced guy because Dawson talked about all the reps he's gotten, in games last year, in practices for the past year, going back to spring of 2024. And Dawson mentioned that really the only way to get consistent is with experience. And he refers to Elijah Lofton as now an experienced guy because he's put in so much work and has gotten so many quality reps at the U. So even though, on the roster, it says Elijah Lofton is a sophomore, Shannon Dawson talks about him more like he's a junior or even a senior with what he brings to the table. And I think the most important thing to emphasize this year with Lofton is create every mismatch you can with this dude. Now, Lofton, I know every Miami fan saw him play. For anybody watching or listening to this who hasn't seen Lofton or doesn't know what he's about, out of Bishop Gorman High School, same high school that former Miami great tight end Brevin Jordan went to. There's a lot of comparisons between Lofton and Jordan, but Lofton has even more versatility. You can line this guy up in the slot. You can line him up wide. You can line him up at running back or fullback. And of course, at tight end, he's also a very good blocker, in addition to being a really good playmaker with the ball in his hands in space. And so here, when asking Shannon Dawson about like how to get Lofton involved in the offense this year and sort of not only the challenges that come from that to try to get this guy the football, but the luxury that comes from that. Here's what Miami's OC had to say.
With him, honestly, I don't even think about, hey, these are the plays that get him the ball, really. I mean, those, obviously I have like a couple ways he's gonna get the ball. But with him, the quarterback typically finds the better players. That's just the way it happens in our offense. And so the ball finds him pretty routinely. Quarterbacks look for him. And so he's a guy that makes plays every day. You put him in the backfield and he ran a 30-yard touchdown. I mean, like, the kid is a very unusual kid. Like, he can do a lot of things. His capacity is really high. And so we're lucky to have him, and we're going to utilize him in every way possible.
I like that at the end. We're going to utilize him in every way possible. The ball routinely finds him, Shannon Dawson says. And he referenced a 30-yard touchdown run. Now, unless that happened in practice today, again, because the practice today was closed to the media, by the way, but I think that might have been something he did at the scrimmage this past Saturday, because I did hear about an Elijah Lofton touchdown run. And here on Locked On Canes, we've even talked about the possibility that Lofton, not only is just, we're going to talk about positionless defense later on in this episode, because that was something that Heatherman, the defensive coordinator, brought up. But we could also talk about positionless offense, because I don't think you can necessarily put a label on Lofton and exactly what position he plays. And I think that's going to include getting more carries this year, that, we might see him, not to say he's going to take too many reps away from Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, who are two of the better running backs in the country, but would not surprise anyone, I think, if Lofton gets like third or fourth amount of reps at running back this coming season. So I think that's something to watch out for. And then why I'm so confident that Lofton is going to be Miami's top weapon this year. It's not only his versatility, but also, the history we have with Miami's starting quarterback, Carson Beck, the way he can connect with a really special tight end. I mean, you remember 2 seasons ago, the on-field relationship that he had with Brock Bowers. And it's, Bowers and Lofton are not the same player. I'm not making a direct comparison, but in terms of the role that they're going to play on this offense, I think there could be some correlation there. And Lofton is already, I'm sure, with all the mental reps and everything, becoming a good friend and an option of Beck, who's, doing all of his due diligence while that elbow recovers. And then once we're actually seeing these guys on the field together, I would expect Beck and Lofton to connect early and often this coming season. And you love to be able to have that sort of player for opposing defensive coordinators this year. And hopefully that starts with Notre Dame, not knowing, what to expect exactly from Lofton, with only having last year's film and not, this year's film. He didn't play a whole lot last year, but to be able to really create those mismatches and keep the defenses on their back foot is going to be such a luxury this coming season. So, yeah, and again, I know I'm taking a bit of a leap of faith here when I say this is going to be the top weapon, because it's not as if Lofton has some crazy statistical resume in college. I mean, remember last year, he was behind Elijah Arroyo, one of the top tight ends in the country, who's off to the NFL. Cam McCormick, of course, played a lot last year. Riley Williams played a lot last year. All three of those guys are either, out of college, or in the case of Williams, he's over at Oregon State now. So Lofton last season, 9 receptions for 150 yards and a touchdown, and had just 2 carries for 30 yards and a rushing touchdown. It's a pretty good yard per carry average for Lofton, but the workload for him is going to be going way, way up this year. Some other playmakers that Shannon Dawson is complimentary of. Nye Carr, Dawson said, made a couple of good plays in practice today. He praised true freshman receiver Joshua Moore as someone who's been consistently good throughout spring, which is great given that he's fresh out of high school. He says that he feels very comfortable with both or either Ray Joseph and Malachi Toney in the slot. Praised the work that Toney is doing, but he did emphasize Ray's experience, right, heading into the third year of this offense. So, and by the way, Ray, from what I've seen and what I've heard, is having a really good spring, and Malachi Toney as well. And Malachi Toney had JD Piquel of On3 Sports was going over a video that came out. I think it was from the scrimmage on Saturday, with our guy Luke Nickel throwing that dime to Malachi Toney, and JD is going crazy about Toney stretching the field. And so I hope we see a lot of Malachi Toney this year as well. Dawson said overall he's really pleased with the attitude and the effort of his offense, saying that they came to play every single day. We'll talk a little bit more about the quarterbacks on the other side. And, I know, again, with Carson Beck, we're still in the wait and see, because he's not fully cleared to throw yet. He's not going to throw at the spring game. He's obviously been very involved in practices and in the film rooms and the meeting rooms. But I think our guy was snubbed. So Bud Elliott, Cover 3 podcast, top college football media personality, puts out this list of top 10 returning quarterbacks in college football. Where do you think he had Beck? We'll explain why he's wrong. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Oh, my friends, I am only getting started with FanDuel. Guys, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. I love those. From 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Do not miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 bonus bet today from FanDuel. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out my guy Spencer McLaughlin at Locked On College Football. I know Spencer was talking recently about the sweepstakes for Jackson Cantwell. The Oregon Ducks are very much in the mix. UGA, Michigan, Miami. We'll have an update on Jackson Cantwell a little bit later on, but make sure you check out Locked On College Football, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, so let me see if I can share my screen real quick for those watching the YouTube version. For those listening, don't worry, I got you covered. So Bud Elliott, and he, to be fair to Bud, I mean, he understands not everybody's going to like this list, because he even said on his X post, he said, roast me. So Bud, who, by the way, has allegiance to Florida State, which is kind of ironic given who he has number one, but he put out his top 10 returning quarterbacks in college football for the upcoming season 2025. He's got, which is, I guess, not surprising given the hype train, DJ Lagway of Florida at number one. I'm not saying Lagway isn't really, really good. I just don't know if I've ever seen someone coming off of a 12-touchdown, 9-interception first year have this much hype heading into the second year, because Lagway at Florida is like turning up at number one on like everybody's lists of quarterbacks for next year. He's got Garrett Nussmeier, LSU at number 2, Drew Aller, Penn State, who I think is a choke artist, at number 3, Sawyer Robinson, Baylor, Cade Klubnik, Clemson at number 5, Lenora Sellers, South Carolina at 6, Washington's DeMond Williams at 7, Sam Levitt of Arizona State, who I really like, at number 8. Got Haynes King at Georgia Tech at number 9, and John Mateer, Cam Ward's former backup at Wazoo. He's now at Oklahoma. He's got John Mateer at number 10. So he's got no Carson Beck in his top 10 returning quarterbacks lists. Now, folks, I don't know if this is like a recency bias thing, since, most of these other guys, although Lagway did miss some time in spring, but most of these other quarterbacks have been, throwing and spring football, and Beck hasn't because of his injury, or if people are just that down on Miami, like, he can't go from Georgia to Miami and expect to be good. Never mind the fact that Georgia's offensive line was not good last year. They led the nation in drops from their receivers, and they were 102nd in rushing. So they didn't exactly help their quarterback last year. Still had a really darn good year, despite being down a little bit from the year prior, but not even in the top 10. Carson Beck is not even in the top 10. So let me give you something factual comparing Beck to these other quarterbacks, okay? And again, these are all returning quarterbacks. None of these guys are first-time starters or freshmen. These are all returning quarterbacks, 10 of them at least ranked ahead of Carson Beck. So even in Beck's alleged down year last year, where he threw for 3,400 yards in change rather than 3,900 yards in change, even in his down year, supposed down year last year, Carson Beck was still 13th nationally in passing. And 7 of the 12 guys that were in front of him in passing last season are no longer in college. 7 of the 12. So how is he not a top 10 returning guy when 7 of the 12 who had more passing yards than he did last year are not even in college anymore, off to the NFL, most of these guys, including our own Cam Ward, who was actually number 2 on that list last year behind Kyle McCord of Syracuse, who's also no longer in college football, and there were 5 others that was the case for. So I think Beck is being sold short here. I believe he is absolutely a top 10 returning guy. And, we heard from Miami's offensive coordinator today. Here's what Shannon Dawson said about Beck. He said, first thing he pointed out was that Beck has a very high football IQ. You could tell he's played a lot of football. His personality comes out over time. He said he's done a really good job of building relationships with people in a fast way. And, it's one of those things where, and also it's worth pointing out, and Dawson talked about this a little bit today, that, of course it's a disadvantage for Beck, first season in a new offense and a new team, to have to miss out on spring football for the most part. Like, he's out there working, he's just not throwing. But at the same time, with the amount of off-season football that guys are allowed to play these days, with the off-schedule workouts and strength and conditioning and the player informal workouts, Beck is going to have plenty of time to catch up. This is something we talked about this on our Wednesday episode yesterday. Like, Carson Beck is going to have enough time to catch up with this offense, and he's going to have better protection than he had at Georgia last year. Should have a better running game with Fletcher and Lyle behind that offensive line than he had last year. And I'm glad to hear that the personality is coming out, because Beck is someone who needs to lead. Like, he needs to be the leader, or at least a leader, on this offense this season. So as far as the other quarterbacks, because with Beck not being able to throw in spring, that's given extra opportunities to Emory Williams. He's the most experienced guy behind Beck, but had, really, really tough bowl game, as we all know, last year. Luke Nickel, Judd Anderson. So Dawson talked about how Emory has bounced back from the bowl game, saying, he's got a strong mentality. He has high confidence in himself, he says. He says Luke Nickel has the ability to throw the football at an elite level. That's the true freshman. Learning an offense, he said, is like learning a new language. As time goes on, you see how those instincts start clicking. And, Dawson talked a lot about, Nickel's sort of adaptation for communicating with his offensive teammates in the huddle and on the field. And it really sounds like Nickel has turned a big corner in that area, right? That the arm talent, the ability to throw, is something that he's always had and is never developing sort of that next gear into being the person who orchestrates and operates the offense smoothly, is something that Luke Nickel has really been improving upon as of late. We talked about Miami's quarterbacks. We talked about Elijah Lofton. Another playmaker that's really been emerging throughout the spring has been wide receiver JoJo Trader. And here, I thought this was a really good question. I think it was by Kane Sports. Difference with JoJo Trader last year into this year is Chris Stock, who asked the question. I thought it was a really good answer by Dawson.
With him, probably just taking ownership of, hey, it's my time. Because I think that was part of the deal, is like when a young kid, especially receiver, comes in, and you got older kids, kind of taking a back seat isn't the right approach a lot of times. And so now he's taking that ownership of that role. And so you see a different level of energy from him on a day-to-day basis. I mean, when it's your time, it's your time. And there's a big difference between being a backup and a role guy and being the dude, and so just his overall sense of who he is on this team and confidence is probably the biggest difference.
Yeah, he knows he's a dude this year, JoJo, and we see it on the field. Like, we see it from guys like him. We see it from guys like Elijah Lofton. Another one that has been really good the last couple weeks, and Dawson has been complimentary of, is CJ Daniels, right? For about the past 2 weeks now, he's been able to practice in full, no restrictions. He was coming off of injury after transferring in from LSU. And, Daniels, it looks as though, and again, this is me projecting like 6 months in advance, 5 months in advance, but I would expect your starting outside receivers to be CJ Daniels and JoJo Trader, probably Ray Joseph in the slot, although Malachi has given him a challenge there. So I think the X factor would be, and we're not really going to know this until, 5 days from now when we start to hear the rumors and the visits being set. How aggressive is Miami going to be, and how aggressive should they be in pursuing receivers in the transfer portal? That's definitely a spot that they could look at. Now, I don't know who's going to be available. I don't know who may be out there, prominent starter type from a different program who might say, you know what, I like what they have going on there in Miami, and I'd like to play with Carson Beck for a year. So maybe that's where I want to be this year. We don't really know who's going to be available yet. Obviously, there have been the rumors out there about big-time receiver from this spot or the other. But we're going to know, in 5 days plus, how aggressive Miami is going to be at receiver. So maybe one of the Hurricanes starting wide receivers is someone who's not even on the roster yet. But, we can be confident that Josiah Trader, CJ Daniels are having really good springs, and they're not, the only ones. I mean, we talked about Nye Carr, was shouted out for having a good practice today, and Josh Moore, we've seen some really good plays for him throughout the spring. A lot of people ask me about Chance Robinson. He's been banged up, so he's gonna hopefully reemerge coming up over the summer and be a big time player for Miami in the future. But would not surprise any of us to get more depth, to get more experience, to maximize one season with Beck if the Hurricanes do decide to go out and go after a receiver. Very interesting thoughts on the defense. So, early on, the completely new scheme install, if you're going to fail, you fail at 100 miles an hour. And that's one thing that defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman talked about. But then you really start to learn and internalize that scheme. You start to communicate better. And over the last couple of weeks, don't take my word for it. Take Mario Cristobal's word for it. Over the last couple of weeks, the defense has been a lot better, and they've been really disruptive. And seems like the defense has won most of the recent practices. And I would say the installs are very much on schedule for Corey Heatherman. The defensive coordinator will give us the scoop on that. Plus, I want to get Coach Heatherman's thoughts on some of these young second-year guys that we talk about a lot. Marquis Lightfoot having a really good spring. Justin Scott having a really good spring. Hayden Lowe has been the talk of the town. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you for making us your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you also check out Locked On ACC. We're going to have a new episode of The Squad tonight. Whenever we get together with Kenton Gibbs and Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse and Isaac Shade from Locked On Tar Heels, it is always a good time. And Locked On ACC is available free wherever you get your podcasts, and it's available free on YouTube. So it was a good question that was asked, I think Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald to Miami's defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, is, you want to get your best 11 on the field, right? What if maybe the majority of your best 11, a couple of extra cornerbacks out there, maybe better than some of your safeties? Are you going to give guys who have CB or cornerback next to their name, are they going to have opportunities to play nickel or play safety to get your best 11 on the field? And, the response from Coach Heatherman was, it's going to be positionless in a lot of ways. He said, it's what is this situation? Who are we playing? What are their best players? Where is their speed? Have to find out what are the best matchups this week for game weeks, he said. We're going to put some guys in different situations. It's a positionless defense, Coach Heatherman said. Is that guy a linebacker or a defensive end? We're always trying to put guys in different roles so we can get bigger, we can get faster, depending on what opponent we're playing, what the offense's personnel or their style is. Every week that can be different, he said. So yeah, at times you'll see 4 corners on the field. Sometimes see them in different spots. Are they at corner or not at corner? Sometimes you'll see multiple linebackers on the field. May see a 5th defensive lineman. Every situation calls for something a little bit different. It's how do we want to attack their offense, he said. Now, again, he talks about communication improving. being the most important thing about his defense, not being exactly where all the defensive coaches want it to be, but that it is improving, right? And there have been a lot of defensive backs who are having really good spring periods. Xavier Lucas is someone we talk about a lot here on Locked On Canes, the transfer from Wisconsin. He's doing really well. Zechariah Poyser, the transfer from Jacksonville State, safety, is doing really, really well. Dylan Day is someone I want to shout out, second-year safety, who's having a good spring period so far. There are some other guys who have been banged up in spring who are going to be more factors in the summer. I've also seen Charles Brantley, the transfer from Michigan State, has had some really good moments in spring. He looks like a nickel. Ethan O'Connor, another transfer, is someone who's had a good spring period. But let's talk about guys who are closer to that line of scrimmage, right? So questions that came in from David Lake at Inside the U and from me about a couple of these defensive linemen. Here's Corey Heatherman first on Marquis Lightfoot, second-year defensive end, former five-star recruit. And then I asked him about Justin Scott, former five-star recruit on the interior. Here's what Coach Heatherman says about their progress.
What has Marquis Lightfoot shown you this spring?
He's explosive. He's dynamic. He does some really good things off the edge. He's playing much better with his hands. He's learning. He's like grasping things very quickly. He continues to get better every day. And he's one of those guys, every day when you watch it, you can tell, as he improves his awareness of the situation, understanding how to beat a tackler, understanding how to beat a guard, understanding situational football, just constantly improving every single day. But he's a guy that, we're excited about what's going to happen as he continues to grow and develop here in the future.
What kind of progress have you seen from Justin Scott this spring?
Yeah, he's, same thing. He's played a lot of different positions right now. He's explosive off the football. He plays with a really good pad level. He can, on a single block right now, he's a guy we anticipate or expect to win. But he continues to get better. His pad level continues to improve. And then just his movements and his, how twitchy he is off the football. He's continued to get better all the way through spring ball.
There's a couple of guys we look forward to watching in the spring game. Marquis Lightfoot, Justin Scott. By the way, Heatherman talked at length about the linebackers, which is the unit that he specifically coaches. He was very complimentary of Raul Popo Aguirre as someone, along with Wesley Besaint, who are really especially standing out in that linebacker group. He also mentioned Hayden Lowe, the true freshman defensive end, and just how much he's learned and grown so far throughout spring. That was when he referred to Hayden Lowe as a guy who, very early on, when he was learning the defense, kind of figuring out his assignments, sometimes you fail to learn, but that Hayden Lowe if he failed a rep, he would fail at 100 miles an hour. that was, easier to adapt and learn when you play with that kind of intensity. So I thought that was really good. Now, the recruit that has had everybody talking as we shift gears from who's on the field now to who may be on the field next year. Miami Hurricanes are very much in it for the top overall prospect in the class of 2026. Offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell out of Nixa, Missouri, 5-star. So here's an interesting update in Cantwell's recruitment. He is told on 3 Sports, 24/7 Sports, Rivals, he's telling everybody today that he's getting close to a decision and that his timeline as to when he's going to make it official and commit somewhere might happen a lot sooner than he thought. I don't know if that means any minute from now, tonight, tomorrow night, a week from now, a month from now, but we may see Jackson Cantwell commit somewhere before he even takes his summer official visits. And his official top 6 are Georgia, Miami, Michigan, Missouri, Ohio State, and Oregon. Now, on 3 Sports reported, it was either yesterday or late Tuesday, that out of those 6, they feel the 3 that are trending highest are, in no particular order, but these 3, Georgia, Miami, and Oregon. So Miami might have a leg up on even, 3 of the other members of that top 6 for Jackson Cantwell. And in saying that, hey, he may make this decision sooner rather than later, he says, I have all the information I need. I don't know how an official visit would change that, really. Oh, he said his top 6, he says, hasn't been narrowed down anymore, and most likely no more trips before the official visit. So he still does want to take the official visits. He just might commit before that. He says, I think this is something that'll be figured out with me and my family, and we already have all of our info that we need, he says. They write about how Georgia has always been one of the front runners for Cantwell. This is from On3. So is Dan Lanning in Oregon, they say, and a visit to Miami in the fall and the return this spring, along with all the conversations with Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes, has turned the U into a front runner. And by the way, out of his top 6, the only one that he doesn't have an official visit scheduled to, he's got 5 OVs scheduled. He does not have an official visit scheduled to Ohio State. But, I mean, if he says he already has all the information he needs before the OVs, I don't even know if that necessarily means Ohio State is behind the other 5. So we're getting closer. And, folks, we know what the selling points have been for Jackson Cantwell to Miami. He has a tremendous relationship with Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. He understands that duo, where Miami really has 2 offensive line coaches, and that duo has developed so many greats over the years. I mean, CeCe Maui-Noah is about to be a first-round draft pick, I believe, a year from now. They had Penei Sewell, Jackson Powers Johnson at Oregon. The list goes on and on and on, because Mario has been doing this for a really, really long time. Cantwell understands that. He understands that, not to say that this is not the case in any of these other schools. Like, there are great options here, but you're going to be developed at that position at Miami. And, you also know that in the case of Miami, I think the timing couldn't be better, right? I mean, if you're Cantwell, you're 6'8", 300+ pound monster already at 17, 18 years old. You're a 5-star, considered to be a polished guy. He wants to go somewhere and start next year, and that option is going to be available at Miami. You still got to go out there and earn it, but Miami is probably losing both of their starting tackles to the NFL next year. So you're going to have jobs open at Miami. Right tackle, left tackle, maybe guard to start your career. Come on down. The options are going to be there for Cantwell. So the timeline seems to be accelerated, and I'm sure in the coming hours or coming days, we're going to learn more about where Miami stands for him. I want to thank you guys so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure to smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button as well on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Thank you for making us your first listen, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.